Fewer rules, fewer regulations can lead to fewer protections for Idahoans. Boise City Council is hoping to put a backstop on some late fees for late rent to stop renters from facing eviction. It's down to days, 11 more sleeps for the Boise Bicycle Project to make dreams come true this holiday season. And that's why they need your help to make it happen. The Boise Bench. Nope, not a place to rest in one of Boise's beautiful parks, but it is a place and one with a rich history. So Idaho's known as a red state. We all know this. Republicans make up a supermajority in the state legislature and in public as well. And such a lean usually leads to low regulation. In fact, at one point, it was a catchphrase for Governor Brad Little, least regulated state in the country. For example, Idaho has no regulations of what a landlord can charge for a late fee. Oregon, Washington, Utah, Nevada, they're among the bordering states that do have some sort of regulation when it comes to late fees. And the city of Boise is looking to take a page out of their playbook, essentially to stop landlords from abusing the system and profiting from said late fees. Here's Andrew Barline.
If you're noticing more people out on the streets, Housing First nonprofit Catch says you're right.
Most folks are kind of in a very difficult financial situation.
Catch works to end homelessness in the Treasure Valley. In November alone, they housed 14 total families.
Housing is a very significant piece of ending homelessness.
But it's not the final piece.
5-6 years ago, we would really strive to get a family to where they were paying about 30% of their income towards their rent when they graduated.
The goal is to create a plan for their client to stay housed, but it's getting harder.
We're graduating people from the program where they're paying 50% of their household income or 60% towards their rent, and it just leaves people in a really precarious situation because the rent rates have increased much faster than income has.
The federal government defines this as rent burdened. These are people who are financially strapped and at times miss rental payments.
I'm not aware of one lease I've ever looked at that didn't have a penalty, a late fee penalty for paying your rent late, so it's a very standard industry practice.
In Idaho, it's a practice with no regulation, meaning landlords can penalize tenants whatever dollar figure they choose to put in the lease agreement. The Boise City Council is discussing a proposed ordinance change to amend that.
I think that it's a good idea, and I think that it's a step in the right direction.
The proposed ordinance intends to prevent landlords from profiting off late fees, reading in part, quote, "No property manager or owner of property shall charge a late rental fee unless the fee is equal to or less than the reasonable actual expense caused by the late payment."
Like if it's a late fee because it costs you a half an hour to write a notice to them, if you could just charge for that half an hour, and a lot of landlords do that, and a lot of landlords practice ethically. But there are some landlords out there that are really just trying to make money, and they charge tenants much more than they need to charge them.
In fact, Catch is working with a landlord right now who they say is charging an excessive amount.
$250.
In Oregon, landlords can't charge a late fee more than 5% of the monthly rate. In Washington, the fee's capped at 20% the monthly rate. And in Utah, all late fees are capped at $75. The lack of gem state regulation doesn't surprise Catch.
Honestly, this whole problem comes down to a math equation.
But with 1,400 people experiencing homelessness in Ada County, Catch welcomes any effort to push toward the goal of zero.
So it's really just targeting landlords that would be taking advantage of the situation.
Now, Catch says this is not a solution to solve homelessness by any means, but Catch says it would create a smoother transition toward independence, which is a big piece of what they do. Help somebody find housing, assist them, and then slowly wean them off assistance to when they would be 100% independent and housed on their own. And there's some kind of questions into that ordinance too, Brian. I mean, how do you regulate that exactly? If you're my tenant and you're late paying me and I'm late paying the bank, well, that can hurt my credit.
Sure.
How am I going to quantify that in a simple dollar amount? So I imagine there's some nuance here and some questions. We know the city council met today to discuss this, and so we'll see what comes out of that.
Yeah, they have to kind of figure out this vagueness of the reasonable actual expense caused by the late payment, which you mentioned also could incur when it comes to your credit rating.
Yeah, there's a little bit of gray area there, and I imagine having a capped dollar figure might help that, but we'll see what actually comes out of it. City council has some more things to refine in this language.
Yeah, and if we are supposedly be the least regulated state in the country, that could go up against that. So we'll see how that plays out. All right, thank you very much, Andrew. Happy birthday, by the way. All right, Idaho's one of the most wide open states when it comes to gun ownership and possession as well. Least regulated state, remember? No license or permit required. You have to be over the age of 18. That's it. But even if you are not over the age of 18, you only need a note from your parents to own or possess a gun. Meanwhile, just across the border in the 541, Oregon's gun laws are about to get a bit stricter. By a narrow margin, 50.7%, Oregonians passed Measure 114 back in November. 50.7%. Measure 114 does several things. It would require a permit to purchase a gun issued by the Department of State Police. That permit would require a fee, a photo ID, you have to be fingerprinted, you got to pass a criminal background check, and you would have to be allowed to own a gun, meaning if you haven't been convicted of a felony or you believe to be a danger to yourself or others. The law also includes a ban on gun magazines that hold more than 10 rounds. A violation of Measure 114 could get you nearly a year in jail or a fine of $6,250 or both. 50.7%, not an overwhelming majority, by the way, and you can likely guess where most of those no votes may have come from. Maybe, say, Eastern Oregon or the rest of the state outside of Portland, maybe. They weren't the only ones thinking it shouldn't go into effect Thursday as planned either. Eastern Oregon I'm talking about. Oregon Department of Justice, the State Association of Chiefs of Police, both asked the federal judge to delay the enforcement of Measure 114 because, well, they weren't ready to implement the permitting system or the training requirements that come with it. And today, that judge agreed with them, sort of. There will be a 30-day delay in the permit to purchase part, but the high capacity ban, that will go into effect beginning on Thursday. There were also 4 lawsuits filed against this law saying it would violate the Second Amendment. And sheriffs in at least 3 Oregon counties, well, they vowed to not enforce it at all. Even Malheur County Sheriff Brian Wolf last week called it unconstitutional and impractical. But Judge Karen Immergut, said otherwise. Today in the ruling, she wrote, the burden imposed by Measure 114 on the core Second Amendment right of self-defense is minimal. And the permitting and training part of the law will remain in play, but in light of the difficulty in getting all of that fully up and running, she said, well, she'll put a stay on it for 30 days. So starting Thursday, those in the 541 can no longer have magazines that hold more than 10 rounds of ammo. And by the beginning of next year, you're going to need a permit to buy a gun. As for whether the county sheriffs of Eastern Oregon will enforce this new law, the 3 that border Idaho and the one that is in the mix, well, we know Baker County Sheriff Travis Ash said they will not focus investigations on magazine capacity issues. That's what he said. Union County Sheriff Cody Bowen and Olawa County Sheriff Joel Fish also said they would not enforce the law at all. We have reached out to Malheur County Sheriff Wolf to find out where he stands with today's ruling, but we have yet to hear back.
It's considered a rite of passage for kids, having their own bike. Hundreds are hoping to get one this holiday season. And now a nonprofit needs help fulfilling one of their longest wish lists ever. One of the oldest neighborhoods in the City of Trees also has one of the more unique nicknames. It's not Boise without the bench. But before we get to all that, let's make sure we get time for this. Grab your phone, type in our number, 208-321-5614. Text us your questions and your comments about the show. Just make sure to include your name and the hashtag #the208. And you can send them to us anytime. But if you want to see them at the end of today's show, well, the clock's ticking. It's the Boise Bicycle Project annual Dream Bike giveaway, and they need some help to help make these kids' holiday dreams come true. Like 11-year-old Ezekiel, who says, "My dream bike is a black and blue BMX with big rims that are chrome and good for wheelies and really fast. If you can get me that, or what you can, that would be great. Thank you." 9-year-old Chevry wrote, "I would like a red bike. It would make me so happy. Thanks so much." How about Jade, who is 8? "I would like to have this bike, and I want the bike to look like this. Oh, and do you like the bike?"
I do like the bike, Jade. You know, for a dozen years, the Boise Bicycle Project has been playing Kris Kringle to thousands of kids in the Treasure Valley, and their goal, making sure every kid has a bicycle of their own. When they started their Adopt a Dream Bike campaign back in 2011, they had 63 kids ask for a bike. Well, thanks to its success and word of mouth, that wish list has jumped to 575 here in year 12. And as you can imagine, they needed a little help finding 575 bikes. Jimmy Halliburton, the executive director of the Boise Bicycle Project, was up bright and early this morning with Maggie and Justin on Wake Up Idaho to talk about that need and what it takes to make sure every kid who asked for a bike will get one.
All of the kids have drawn pictures of their dream bikes. We're in the process of selecting them, making sure that each kid gets the perfect bicycle for them. Our volunteers are working away, but we're running into a huge problem in that we've got 200 more bikes that we need to fill. And we've got 12 bikes left on the shelf to fix for our volunteers. And these bicycles are a big deal for these kids. A lot of them, this is how they're getting to school, to after-school programs. The kids, when they're applying for a bike, they're referred to us from another nonprofit. And the nonprofit helps them draw a picture or write a story. And we got a story earlier this week from somebody from Ukraine who had to leave their bicycle behind when they were fleeing the country. And so they're dreaming of a bicycle, that one thing that might make Boise a little bit more like home. And familiar to them. And so these bikes make a life-changing difference for every single one of these kids.
You know, the pictures are cool, but the stories are just as cool, if not better. These kids are asked to draw a picture of their dream bike, as you heard him say, and they write that description of how they want it completed. Halliburton and his horde of helpers, they try to make it all happen. So this is where your help comes in. Check your garage, your sheds, just something that happens to be laying around the backyard. If you have bikes that your kids have outgrown, or maybe they just don't ride them anymore, drop them off at the Boise Bicycle Project downtown Boise in any condition. They will refurbish them. They will paint them. They'll put on all the accessories to make it look like the picture, to match the description the kids write for it. And if you don't have a bike to donate, but you still want to help out, they gladly accept your cash. You know, those baskets and those grips and those horns, they cost money. To dreamify a bike, as they call it, it takes about $50 for a 2 to 4-year-old bike. That was bike for a 2 to 4-year-old. $75 for 5 to 7-year-olds, and about $100 for bikes for kids 8 to 11. You could actually go online and see all of the bikes that are available to adopt, should you wish to do that. The website, that's on your screen right now. There's so many to share and so many that still need to be adopted. Some of you've seen already, as we've shown you. The clock is ticking. Those bikes will be given out next Saturday, December 17th. Dream bikes like these.
All right, more Boise Bicycle Project dream bikes. Like from Trenton, who's 6. "I want it to look like a Hot Wheels." Well, even if the drawing doesn't. I want a Hot Wheels to look like that, Trenton. Kira, who's 10. "This is one of my favorite bikes. But one of my old bikes, me and my second best friend, was matching. But my old one popped, and we never got it fixed. Well, here's hoping to get a new one." Kira isn't alone with a broken bike. Juan, who is 9, really wants a bike because my brother accidentally broke my old bike. So I really want a bike.
You know, the backbone of the 208 is the back and forth we have with our viewers. It's why we ask for text messages throughout the show and anytime, really. Back a bit, we got this text message from Gladys in Emmett. She wrote, "This has nothing to do with anything you've been talking about," which is sometimes our favorite kind of text message, by the way. But she continued, "I hear the expression, the Boise Bench, all the time, also in Emmett. So my question is, where are both of them?" Well, Gladys, we don't know much about the bench in Emmett, but we do know a bit about the Boise Bench. Well, we do now, after talking to the Idaho Historical Society.
Okay, the Boise Bench. Where is it? Well, first, let's look at the layout of the valley carved out by the Boise River well before it even had a name. Tens of thousands of years of mountain snow melting and water running downhill unchecked created the levels we know today. There's the lower level, basically the river and all of downtown Boise westward. Then the next level, well, that would be the bench.
West from Federal Way, north from the Boise Airport, and east from Cole Road.
Literally, like a bench, a place for your feet and a place for your seat.
So that's geographically what the Boise Bench has historically been considered, and even what residents as early as 1900 would have considered the Boise Bench.
As for how the bench should be considered historically,
It's the next chapter outside of that first 5 years of downtown core development.
that first chapter began months after Idaho became a territory.
In fact, Boise City was platted and established on July 7th, 1863.
So a city was started, and getting in and out of it, well, those days, that meant trains.
But before you can have railroad, you have to have water.
Thus, the next chapter, which developed by diverting water south from the Boise River with the Reidenbach Canal in 1865. While all that was happening, in 1871, a man named William Morris moved to town.
And again, we don't know a lot about William Morris, but we do know that he was involved with a number of organizations, a number of businesses.
One of those as a manager of the Northwest Stage Lines. However, his duties, and apparently his disposition, were often disagreeable, as noted by a historian from the 1890s.
An antique specimen of human nature, encased in a body which was just a trifle larger than his soul and conscience. He was a mass of prejudices and sinuous vindictiveness. The reason I mention him, although he deserves to be forgotten, is that his character should go on record for what it was. And, in addition, the names of the decent men connected with that corporation should be made more brilliant by comparison with him.
Okay, so as a person, he may deserve to be forgotten, but as a property owner, not so much. The man with a mass of prejudices managed to amass a lot of land.
And he was kind of the founder of the Boise Bench because he took action to acquire more than 17,000 acres of land south of town on the bench through the Desert Land Act.
Which made more acreage available for a lot less money. Then Morris was also able to get a lot of farmers and businessmen to help finish the Reidenbach Canal.
By 1891, there's more than 100 miles of ditch, 153 laterals within this Reidenbach system, and it irrigates 22,000 acres of land on the bench.
A flood irrigation system that allowed for the blossoming of orchards, like apples, plums, and peaches. And it's a system that is still in place today, and why the bench became one of Boise's first suburbs.
You cannot talk about the history of the city of Boise without acknowledging that the Boise Bench is woven into that fabric.
Well, the bench wasn't only Boise's first suburb, but it became home to Idaho's first shopping center, the Vista Village. Still there, by the way, on Vista. Orchard Orchard, the street appropriately named, became one of the main roads to get people north and south on the bench. And, well, despite being known for being a bad guy, we also know the name William Morris because of the Morris Hill Cemetery. By the way, the end of the bench, we're told, is where the irrigation water stops, where the canals stop. The Reidenbaugh eventually heads south, but the Settlers Canal continues west and helps define the seat of the bench further west. And then there's even another level beyond that. You know, the one where the interstate and the airport sit? Well, the airport, which wasn't built until 1936, that's kind of another level entirely. And yes, Gladys, Emmett does have a bench. It's north of the Payette River.
More Boise Bicycle Project dream bikes from Mohammed, who is 10. This bike is so cool. Thank you. I like bikes, but don't know how to ride a bike, so please make the bike easy to ride and fast. Please and thank you. Smiley face. 11-year-old Katuma, very colorful in her drawing, said, I had a bike when I was 6 and it had training wheels. I was never able to learn without because it popped. Now I have my brother's bike, but it's old and starting to wear out. I want my own. Then 8-year-old Mahaman says, I want a basket because so I could put stuff so I do not have to hold it. I want a helmet that could glow because so I could see in the dark. Also, a locker so no one can steal me bike.
All right, you may have heard me mention this earlier, and he's going to absolutely hate me saying this, but we want to wish that guy right there, Andrew Bartline, a happy birthday today, December 6th. There he is doing all kinds of things across the newsroom, works in sports, goes out and does whatever we ask him to do, and he does it with a smile on his face, and it is infectious, and we appreciate him every single day. Happy birthday, Andrew. All right, let's get to your comments that you sent in for today. I want to get to this one first. How long will it be before the Idaho legislature passes a bill to enshrine a landlord's ability to charge whatever they feel like on a past due rent? Even if Boise doesn't pass its late fee cap, Republican legislators will want to ensure capitalism is free to do its worst. It's the Idaho way, says Jan. Well, Jan, remember last legislative session when they tried to pass House Bill 442, and that's the one that would add rent fees and deposits to, well, basically whatever any renter or landlord could charge for rent fees and deposits. They tried to do that last legislative session. It made it out of the House, but died in the Senate. So you may not be off too far with that one. Guns should be treated like vehicles from a gun owner, says Bruce. Meanwhile, when it comes to constitutionality, I will defer to a legally trained judge over a sheriff whose only requirement for being one is getting elected, says Jack in Boise. This is about the bill in Oregon, 114, the Measure 114 that passed and is now going to be going into effect on Thursday. Part of it, though, at the beginning of next year. Can a sheriff really decide if they can enforce a law or not? Isn't that their job to enforce a law even if they don't like it, asks Lori. It's a good question, one we would love to ask any of the sheriffs in Eastern Oregon who say they will not enforce this law. They are sworn to enforce the law, but they say they are sworn to enforce and abide by the Constitution. And if they say, well, it violates that, then they can make that decision accordingly. Not really seen it happen, play out that way, but it's worth asking that question. Thank you, Boise Bicycle Project, for showing there is more good in the world than bad. Santa on, says Michelle in Haley. Good point. They still need more bikes. You got 11 days to do so. Cash, bikes, whatever you want to donate. We'll see you tomorrow.